I might not be able to do much else, but I can make a goddamn intro.
That is a really, really decent intro. I fucking love that. Yeah, that is good.
I learned a little bit in art school, a little bit before I dropped out. I took some notes. How you doing out
Hey,
in Ireland there, Brandon?
I am doing just dandy. Yeah, and aloha in Hawaii. How are you
Yes,
doing?
not too bad. I'm sorry earlier I didn't specify to you that I was not in Georgia anymore, that I was currently living in Hawaii because you've been fucked up all day thinking I was stuck in Georgia because you're like, holy shit, he's going to be up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to do this.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm. It gave me some rest time, so I'm ready, and I'm here to nerd out about werewolves and all things with fangs and hair, and there's just so much to talk about. There really is, So
It's probably to
and
me one of the most underappreciated genres in horror. It's the least used, I feel, a lot of times. And
I
maybe
I think
that's good
I
and
I think I think it's the least used because they probably see it as too hard to do, too difficult to do. But we can talk a little bit more about that later. Um, the the thing about, if we talk about wolves in general, first and foremost, you were telling me earlier that the probably the biggest and most dangerous predator you have in Hawaii is some kind of pig.
yeah, wild pigs
Yeah,
over here.
yeah. So we don't have any wolves in Ireland. The last wolf was killed in Ireland in 1786, and Irish people would have had great respect for wolves back hundreds of years ago. In actual fact, the Irish for wolf, there's a few different interpretations, but a wolf would have been called Mac Tira, the son of the land. But they they became extinct, and today they're talking about reintroducing them because we have this massive overinfestation of deer that are just doing a lot of damage to farmers' land where livestock has been released and so much more. And I do appreciate there's two sides to every story because there's conservationists out there that don't want wolves going out killing deers, and there's certainly people who would fear wolves if they met them out hiking and stuff. So it's a bit of a conundrum as to what they will do going forward. I mean, even a few years ago here, they reintroduced the eagle into Ireland. We have a few eagles in Ireland, but again, the farmers lost their shit over it because they were eagles that were picking up their lambs and they were taking them away, and that didn't go down too well, so they were poisoning the eagles, etc. But even in America, the wolves almost became extinct at
Hmm.
one point until in the 20th century when a conservation order came in on them. So they are a wonderful looking creature, but they're certainly not a creature I'd like to come up close and personal with. Mm.
The beauty of them to me is within their social, the way they are with one another. I mean,
Mm.
a wolf pack is that family. I mean, and the way that the pups are born, they're born within their separate packs, and it carries on a generation after generation, much like us. When we're born and we raise our families, it's the same way.
Oh
And
yeah, you've got the alpha male and you've got the alpha female, and you have a pack then, and they hunt together, and they're very much, they remind me of crows. Crows are very loyal to each other. and they hunt together, for whatever they can scavenge. So wolves are, and then crows fascinate me. They genuinely fascinate me. That's a different story. You could have me talking about crows all day. I love the guys, but wolves, they're beautiful in every way, but you can see the danger of them. I'm reminded of that movie, The Grey, which wasn't brilliant, with Liam Neeson. Have you ever
Hmm.
seen that? Yeah,
Yep.
not a great movie, but it made the the animal of the wolf the antagonist. But of course, we're here tonight to talk about um, werewolves, lycanthropes. Yes, and the little bit of history of it, and of course the movies that have uh, just inspired us over the decades, and have made us had sleepless nights, and have just made us also have lots of fun as well. So um the lycanthrope. Um, you were talking about that there's so many different ideas about the history of werewolves. So there's the mythology you were talking about a while ago, the King Lycan.
Yep. King Lycion, or
Mm,
maybe it was Lycan. It was just spelled
like
different.
King Lycan, I'd say, yeah, as in lycanthrope.
But he, what does it say? Oh, said it was King Lyson. He ruled over the land in Arcadia and had thousands of men and women under his command. His palace was filled with gold, fine foods, and elaborate artwork. But one thing he did not have was love. So it's basically just a love story about this guy. So he was hunting in the forest and came upon a small lake. As he approached, he saw a lady sitting at the edge of the lake singing. Her song was a song full of longing. Drawn in by her words, King Lycan dismounted from his horse and approached her. When the woman turned to face the king, her incredible beauty struck him. My lady, your song is so beautiful, but so depressing. Tell me what you wish, and I will do everything in my power to grant it. But first, what shall I call you? You may call me Fortuna. My lord, I am distressed because I fear I will never find a man to love. My father is too hard to please and will not grant me permission to just marry anyone. So it's basically centered around with him. It's basically just centered around a whole. It's way too much for me to read, guys, but it's
Mm.
just a giant love story about this king.
There's a lot of different ideas about werewolves. Eastern Europe has a lot of different ideas about werewolves. Some of them about people wearing belts made of wolves' fur that would turn them into werewolves. Um, Others that if people were to drink rainwater from the paw print of a werewolf, that they would become a werewolf. Of course, there's the one, if you're bitten by a werewolf, you would become one. And there's even a one from Italy where if you sleep outside on a Wednesday
Yep.
or a Friday in a full moon, you'll become a werewolf. You know, so there's tons and tons of different stories about the origins of werewolves, but it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. So
Even
we
indigenous tribes in the United States, Native American tribes, even said some of their brothers even possessed the spirit of a wolf, which was basically a werewolf.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it it's probably what thousands of years old. Just the
yeah.
concept of it alone. I mean, it
But
goes as far back as what Greek mythology. I
yeah,
mean,
but you you're going to start off by talking about the the one, I suppose, that broke all boundaries. 1935, Lon Chaney Jr., The
Well,
Wolf.
actually, I was going to touch on the very first werewolf film,
Okay.
and this
Yeah.
one was only a 18-minute silent film, which
Mm.
that was a full-length movie back in them days. And it was called The Werewolf from 1913, and it was a short silent film that was directed by Henry McCrae and produced by Bison Film Company and a young Universal Film Manufacturing Company before it became Universal Studios. It starred Clarence Burton, Marie Wallkamp, Phyllis Gordon, Law Warrington, and William Clifford. And to be truthfully honest, I think this movie has been lost to history, sadly. I don't think there's anything other than actual written record that this movie existed in some lobby cards and different things like that. But I don't think that the film, yeah, it was destroyed in 1924 at the fire at Universal Studios. So yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
All right.
So
Okay.
when
Oh,
if we want to look at the werewolf movie, yeah, this was the first, but the one that we can still watch to this day is obviously Lon Chaney Jr.'s from 1941, The Wolf Man. Had Lon Chaney Jr. in it as Lawrence Talbot and had Claude Rains in it, who also played his father. Uh,
he had Lon Chaney Jr. had a very interesting upbringing. His father, of course, Lon Chaney, was the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Phantom of the Opera, and himself and his wife would have been vaudevillains, you know, and they would have had a very tumultuous relationship. According to Lon Chaney Jr.'s biographer, Lon Chaney was Lon Chaney Jr. was born premature, and he was apparently only 2 pounds in weight. And when he was born, the Lon Chaney took the baby from the doctor's arms, and he brought him out into the cold night, took an axe, and he broke the ice in this lake, and he put the baby into the water. And when he came out, he was crying. So when I was reading about this, I thought this was going to go another way entirely, you know. But obviously, we know that Lon Chaney Jr. survived it. But um, his mother went on to um, drink poison on stage at one point and lost her voice, and there was a very difficult split between his father and his mother, and he would have been in foster care for quite a while, and he tried to make a career for himself in later life, and he tried to go by his own name, his birth name, but they wanted him to use his father's name, Lon Chaney, and so he became Lon Chaney Jr. Yeah, and he
it,
followed very much in his father's footsteps.
it was sad. I don't know if it was following in his footsteps or the fact that he was just overshadowed by the shadow of his father his whole career.
Yeah,
It's like he could
yeah,
never escape it. He
yeah,
it was always, oh, well, oh, it's Lon Chaney Jr. We'll get him because that's Lon Chaney's boy. You know, he'll work out.
yeah,
He never got recognition on his own merit. It was, oh, you're the son of the legend, Lon Chaney Sr. Which let's not, you know, throw shade at Lon Chaney Sr. at all. Known as the man of 1,000 faces, do his own makeup effects and stuff like that. I mean, you're talking like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback at Notre Dame, on and on and on. Hell, he was supposed to be the original Dracula,
mm,
but he developed throat cancer, and that went to Bela Lugosi. So A lot of people don't know that.
But even prior to that, before he did the Wolfman, he was George in Of Mice and Men, and he wasn't the original choice for that movie, and he fought hard to get the role, and he made it one of the most. I mean, you talk about the Wolfman, but Lon Chaney Jr.'s role as George in Of Mice and Men is incredibly memorable,
Oh
and
God,
is referenced to this
that
day so many times.
that was an Academy Award winning performance he had in that movie. He made that movie. If
Mm.
you Of Mice and Men, I think was what, a Broadway play at one point in time, or it was a stage play, and they translated it to film, which I think might have been one of the first films that they translated from the stage to actual film. But Lon Chaney Jr. knocked it out of the park. So he was more than just a horror actor. He's just known more for horror because, my God, I mean, he's played Wolfman, Mummy, Frankenstein's monster. He's played Dracula, Dracula's son, Alucard. I mean, he's pretty much run the gambit when it comes to the Universal monsters. He's kind of been the second string guy to come in and cover down when they couldn't get the original.
And in that era, Hollywood had this, this real burst of horror movies, as you say, with the Mummy, the Invisible Man. All the Universal stuff really exploded out there, and it created this just this huge, enjoyable theater going experience. Whereas other people were watching dramas all the time, horror was introduced, and people just loved it. And here we are to this day, thankfully, and people are still obsessed, thankfully, with horror because it's a fantastic genre, and it's just great fun.
And here's the thing that always gets me is, like, for instance, I'll use for example my son. I introduced him to some Universal stuff back in a couple of years back. And when he watched it, he gets to the end and he was disappointed. And I was like, why are you disappointed? It was Dracula I showed him with Bela Lugosi.
Hmm.
He goes, well, they didn't show a fight between Van Helsing and Dracula and all this other stuff. And I said, son, you're missing the point with these movies. I said, you got to think, put yourself in that time period of the 20s, 30s, 40s. I said, this shit right here was terrifying to people because they'd never seen it before. I was like, we're dealing with a society at that point in time that this kind of stuff, I was like, King Kong, for instance, we see it. It's not scary. It's just giant ape crawling around. I said, but people were actually passing out and, like, having panic attacks in the theaters watching this shit. I said, plus two, I said, film back then was basically just a recorded stage play. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all it was. And I said, what you're watching with Dracula, Wolfman, Mummy, I said, you're watching what you would see on stage, but played in front of a camera.
It's like that time when the audience saw the train in the theater that was approaching them,
Mm-hmm.
and they thought it was real, and they ran out of the theater because they thought it was going to burst into the actual theater itself. And today we take all these things for advantage, because we know it isn't real, and that's the fun of horror, that we can watch these things, and as grotesque and gruesome and gory as they get, we can remind ourselves that it's only a horror film, it's only a movie, but it's and I use this word so many times, it's wonderful escapism. But on the subject of werewolf movies in general. Uh, According to, and we're going by Watch Mojo here, the top 10 werewolf movies of all time. Now, anyone in the comments can disagree with these, and there are one or two of these that I do heavily disagree with. But feel free to absolutely shit all over some of these ones, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So
you
now,
can't thumbs down anymore, but you can shit on it.
um, the number 10 for me, and the one I haven't seen, is Bad Moon. Now, have you seen that?
No, but I have done a little bit of reading on it, and like
Mm.
I was telling you before we started recording, the best I gathered from what I've read on it, it was like a Terminator mixed with a werewolf kind of story to
Yeah,
an
and it was something
extent.
about the family dog who was trying to protect the family from this werewolf. So I haven't seen it, but look, if it's good, I'll watch it. Yeah. So number 9 is something you're going to talk a little about in a while. And I haven't seen it for many years. And it's the more family friendly one. And I do really want to watch it again. Is Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf. Yeah.
The movie that is so bad that it's good.
Yeah.
It's what I always say about it. It is. If you're going into this thinking that that movie's going to be something that's going to just put this impression on you, like, oh my God, what have I just watched? It's not for you. This is it's just a straight up popcorn movie. It's fun. It's very campy.
Yeah.
It's, it's all about just, taking a horror icon and making it something that kids could have fun with, right? And that was what I loved about it. It was written by Jeff Loeb, and those that are comic book nerds like moi, Jeff Loeb, who wrote Batman's Long Halloween, God, what else? Daredevil Yellow, Hulk Green, Spider Man Blue, blah blah blah. Um, this was like the first movie that he ever wrote, and it was a big deal for the time because at the time that they released this movie was when Michael J. Fox was the shit in Hollywood because right after Back to the Future came out, this movie released. So they picked the perfect time because I mean nobody knew that Michael J. Fox, because Michael J. Fox was actually working on this movie before Back to the Future, and
Right. Okay.
he wasn't supposed to be the original Marty McFly, but
Yes, that was Edward Stoltz, wasn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but when Back to the Future exploded, this movie, benefited from it. Now,
Yeah.
did it benefit from it at the box office? No, oh, it was shit at the box office, but on the secondary market and the video stores, they couldn't keep it on the shelf. Believe
Yeah.
me, I was there in the video stores. You could not find this movie. You
Yeah.
had to reserve it at one point in time.
Yeah.
And yeah, kids, there was a thing when you used to go in the video store before Netflix. I know it sounds like caveman bullshit, but you just had to put your name down on this little list that would reserve that movie because that was the only way you were going to get it.
I'll tell you I'll tell you a very, very quick funny anecdote about video shops. Many years ago in the 90s, when Seven came out with Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt, um, went down to the video store. Uh, can I get Seven? And the guy said, they're all booked out, And I went, bollocks, And I was walking up the street back to my house, and I met my neighbor, and he said, I said, how are you getting on? He said, I'm good. He said, I'm sitting down to watch Seven for the night with my wife. And I went, all right. And I said, what time are you watching it? He said, oh, I said, I'm watching around 9 o'clock. And I said, should be finished around 11. And he said, yeah. I said, can I get it off you then? And he said, you can if you want, right? And I went down to the house at 11 o'clock, and I took the video off him, and I went up and I watched it. I was like, nice one, right? And the guy in the video shop found out, and he went fucking ape shit over
I used to work deals like that with friends. I had, well, growing up, I used to have this friend named Michael Hancock, and I've mentioned him in the past. And Michael, if you ever watch anything I do, hope you and the family are doing well, my friend. Haven't spoken to Michael in a long time, but his dad and his mom owned a video store, and we would get anything and everything we wanted. And when I was telling you how, and I've told this story many times, kind of like my crack dealers, I could go in there and find, because Miss Pat and Mr. Jim always knew this guy liked obscure shit that nobody else would watch, and they would always feed it to me. And but there were times where, if you, like Brandon was saying, if you went to get the tape and you couldn't get it, but your friend had it, I've worked that deal before, because what you would do is it'd be like, hey, dude, let me borrow the tape. I'll take it back in tomorrow and I'll pay the late fee for it.
Yeah,
And you would work it like that. That was,
yeah,
that was before we had all this internet shit, but
yeah.
you, you had to wheel and deal to
We
watch the
wheel and
movie.
deal and improvise. We certainly did. Um, Number 8 on the Watch Mojo is Wolf with Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
Great movie. Um, it's one of those movies where he embraces the curse, and then when he falls in love with Michelle Pfeiffer, he realizes that the curse is bad.
Mm.
Um, Classic scene in it's when he's getting mugged, and the guys are asking, he's telling them sarcastically how much money's in his wallet. Do I give you $1? Do I give you $5? How much you want? And he's sitting there, and as he's telling them, he's slowly turning into the werewolf, which is cool. And then he pisses on James Spader's shoes at one
Yes,
point. Maybe two.
he's marking his territory. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't seen it for many years. I remember it was good. Yeah, it wasn't bad, you know. But Jack is fucking great. I mean, I miss
They
Jack.
They
I
said
do.
they really didn't have to put any makeup on him because his face and bone structure already
Yeah.
has that look about him. He already had that wolf look about him. They just had to put a little bit of prosthetics on. That was it. They said that was probably like the easiest of doing a werewolf. I don't think they fully wolfed him out, did they? I mean, he was. I
No,
can't.
it was much more of a subtle werewolf in that movie. But yeah, it's a shame to think that we will probably never see that man in a movie ever again. You know, so
Well, he's got to be.
it's
Goddamn, he's got to be what, like 80 something years old, 90. He's still courtside at Lakers games, so I mean, you still see him at them Los Angeles Lakers games, but.
yes, but cognitively, by all accounts, he's not in the best of health. So it's a terrible pity because he's a legend. Yes, I don't give a shit what anyone says. I mean, I love the guy. I love his stuff.
This is off
Uh,
subject of werewolves, but guys, as we're talking about Jack Nicholson, if I can give you one movie recommendation to watch of Jack Nicholson, where it's a master class that he's given you, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest with Jack Nicholson.
mhm.
That movie right there, take away. I mean, yes, everything he's done has been great. Yeah, he's had some turds here and there, but that movie right there, holy shit. That one, I'm sorry, it to this day is probably the best he's ever done.
And as you know, professionally, I work in mental health, so I've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest several times. I've seen even the stage production of it, and I have studied it and compared it and contrasted it to modern day psychiatry. And there are certain pieces of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that still apply to modern day psychiatry. And by that, I mean that electroconvulsive therapy is still a thing, but is very rare in Ireland. and also the character Randall McMurphy. Um, there are people out there that do behave like that to this day. Yeah. But we're going off topic, so we'll stick with the werewolves.
That was just my suggestion, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But no, it is a great movie. Um, Ginger Snaps. Now, Ginger Snaps is without doubt one of those cult classics that, for me, it was made. So we'll stop here for a little while. We'll discuss this one because I rewatched it again yesterday. Um, it's a Canadian movie. It's definitely something that, and I'm certainly not being sexist when I say this, but it's definitely something that female horror fans will really really love, and they'll put up there with their top fives. Um, it's a coming of age movie, and it's almost like an analogy of a puberty, because you have these two sisters, played by Catherine Isabel and Emily Perkins. Catherine Isabel playing Ginger, and Emily Perkins playing Bridget.
Mhm.
And the thing about it, when I watched it yesterday, I was racking my head trying to figure out where had I seen Bridget Perkins before, because the face looked so familiar. And if you watch it, she is actually the young Beverly Marsh in Tommy Lee Wallace's Stephen King's It. And
Yep.
yes, which again, ironically, her character plays very much on the whole pubescent role as well, because of her fear of um, her menstruating and all that. And this movie is about these two girls who are, they're goth girls, they're sisters, they are late in menstruating for some reason, and their mother is played by Mimi Rogers, who was once married to Tom Cruise, if anyone remembers. And it's it's just a really decent werewolf movie, because again, the director, uh, he wanted to go all practical with this, and and he did a decent job, in fairness to him, because of the budget that he had. It was 3.5 million, I think. And he it starts off with the Beast of Bailey Downs, and you have this kid in a sandlot in the back garden of this Canadian neighborhood, and something sinister is going to happen with the cinematography and it, the way it's done. And all of a sudden he finds the family dog's paw in the sandlot, and the mother rushes over, and then of course they find the family dog ripped to absolute shreds. And then of course dogs all over the neighborhood are just being torn asunder by the werewolf. And these two sisters, Bridget, Bridget and Ginger, are they're outcasts really, and they're bullied at school, and they're there's a brilliant opening sequence where they stage their deaths. And
They are part of that goth subgenre, very much.
yes,
Yeah, that very gothic
they
kind
have
of.
this horrible slideshow of them being found dead by hanging and impaled on things, and then they show it as a kind of a school project, much to the disgust of their school teacher. And of course, spoiler alert, there are going to be a few spoilers. I'm sure lots of horror fans have seen Ginger Snaps, but Ginger is bitten and soon after that, the wolf that bites her is he's hit by a van by one of the local drug dealers who happens to be a kind of an anti-hero in this, in that he teams up with her sister afterwards to try and control Ginger's transformation. So it's a very decent film. It really is, and it's one of those films again that didn't make a whole packet at the box office, and but it exploded on DVD afterwards, word of mouth, because the theatrical releases just didn't do enough for it because I suppose they didn't have the budget there, and the word of mouth afterwards had DVDs being rented and sold all over the place, so much so that they made two sequels. Mm.
I've always said that Ginger Snaps was a kind of a precursor to Jennifer's Body, with
Very similar, yeah.
where you had this loser girl who hung out with, well, in this movie, two loser sisters. One gets bit by a werewolf, and all of a sudden she develops this confidence about herself, all this stuff, and there's a sex appeal about her, and she's getting noticed more, and not so much her sister. But then people were turning up, and for you gore hounds out there, this movie is very bloody,
Oh
very
yeah, yeah,
bloody.
yeah.
And Jennifer's Body, I always, when I watched Jennifer's Body, I was like, holy shit, this is the same premise as Ginger Snaps,
Mm, yeah,
different, one's, of course, a demon and the other one being a werewolf. But
yeah.
this movie, too, we never seen female werewolves too often as, as the main character for the movie. A lot of times it was always males that portrayed the werewolf. So this was definitely a different spin on it by having a female portray the werewolf.
And there were people involved in the movie that didn't like that idea. They didn't like um, the whole idea of a female werewolf because they felt it would be uh, possibly derogatory towards females, and that it may not go down well with women. And in actual fact, what they didn't realize was there's there's demographics out there for everything. So it worked, and it worked very well. And male and female people all over the world loved it. You know, I have never heard a bad syllable about Ginger Snaps,
Uh,
and I couldn't see why anyone wouldn't like it, because the practical effects were very well done on it. They were teased out quite nicely. It was completely different to some other movies that we'll talk about subsequently, in that, it starts off very subtly where she grows a little tail and it gets longer, and um, until eventually you get the full transformation. And that's a very decent transformation, because you can tell. And this is the thing, um, something I didn't want to mention, but we're just going to mention it briefly. The Twilight series, when you've got Taylor Lautner, or whatever the hell his fucking name is, changing from a human into a werewolf in
just
the
like
blink
that.
of in the blink of an eye. It's just kind of like, fuck off, give me a break. But when you've got Ginger in the back of the van when they're taking her back to the house to try and inject her, and try and bring her back, and it's just this disgusting, gory mess that is bubbling until eventually she becomes this quadruped that is blood and big snarling fangs, and the way she leaps up on the table, and that part where Bridget tries to uh, appease her by lapping up some of the blood from the young men that she has paired off with to try and help her. That's good shit. That is,
Yeah,
when
that was what was that, the scene where she disemboweled that guy
yeah, yeah,
and he was still alive.
mm,
So, or barely, but
mm,
yeah, I remember that. And she had to like act like she was licking up the blood to be accepted
yeah,
by her sister.
yeah, yeah. So I
Very,
mean, like, no, the practicalities in that are just fantastic. So and again, the budget there is just it's yeah, 4.5 million. That's what it was according to this, and it was shot in 6 weeks and it was edited in 8 weeks. So there you go. Yeah. So moving on, in our number in our top 10, we have, and you've discussed it already. At number one, two, three, four, five is The Wolfman, Universal, with Lon Chaney Jr. And unbelievably, um, number four is the Underworld franchise. I've never watched the Underworld franchise.
and I don't even consider that werewolf movies.
Yeah. Now, look, this is Watch Mojo. This isn't our opinion, right? Okay. Um, if we were to do our own top 10 of werewolf movies, people may disagree with us and may talk shit about us in the comments or whatever. But look, we're going by Watch Mojo and we're giving our opinions here on what we think. But I don't want to watch the Underworld franchise because it's just saturated with CGI. I've seen enough clips from it, I've seen enough trailers to know that I do not want to watch this film at all. So I'm just going to move swiftly on to number four, which is Silver Bullet.
Stephen
Uh,
King movie,
Stephen King.
or
Yeah,
the novel that was turned into a movie.
yeah. Haven't seen it for as many years.
Had the late
I,
Corey Haim in it, who played a quadriplegic.
yes, 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 yes. I forgot about that actually. Yeah. I always get confused between the two of them. Um,
Crazy Gary
and
Busey.
yeah, I'd forgotten he died actually. Yes. Of course, Corey Feldman is in a very peculiar position at the moment, isn't he? Where he's God knows what's going on in his head with the claims he's making, whether they're true or not, I don't know. But look, yeah, that's a different story entirely. It's a movie though that I must rewatch because I haven't
So
seen it, but I definitely saw it many moons back, if you pardon the pun. But it's certainly something I will rewatch at some point. Yeah. So, but
it it doesn't hold up. It doesn't, but
yeah,
it's still fun to watch. And it's based off of a movie or a book called The Cycle of the Werewolf, which I have, and it's a great read. The twist I liked on it was that the werewolf, spoiler, look, this movie's almost 40 years old, so whatever, but the reverend of the church ends up being the werewolf. Reverend Lowe is your big bad in this movie. So, and Corey Haim, who plays Marty, um, is this quadriplegic kid that, he's confined to this cool looking wheelchair, by the way. It looks like a scooter and shit. And he's the one that's slowly starting to figure out that Reverend Lowe ain't what all, ain't everything ain't kosher with him, So, and then you got Gary Busey in it who plays Uncle Red, and I forget who else. Um, pull up my IMDb. Terry O'Quinn was in it,
oh
and
yeah,
Joe Wright.
like
But yeah, I mean, does it hold up for almost 40 years later? Not really, but it's still worth freaking watching, and it's still a great werewolf movie. The werewolf makeup and stuff that they use for it looks so bad today, but
yeah.
I've seen worse. Believe me, I've seen worse.
Okay. Number two is everyone is going to know what number two is. It's
The
the
Howling.
Howling. The Howling. Yes. The Howling is The Howling came out in 1981, and it, number one is an American Werewolf in London, right? And the reason I'm going to reveal number one and number two together is because there are some very similar stories attached to the two of them. For instance, they're both released in the same year, right? Rick Baker was actually originally supposed to do the makeup effects for the Howling, yeah,
But
but
he was
left.
replaced by Rob Boutin.
And he was going on to do an American Werewolf with John Landis anyway. So it was ironic that he would go from the Howling to Werewolf in London. So Dee Wallace. Um, I don't know if anyone follows Dee Wallace on TikTok, but that woman is just, she seems like one of the most beautiful women in so many ways. She's been in so many different movies. Um, she seems like a wonderfully spirited person, and her husband plays her partner in the actual movie. Um, and when she auditioned for it, they didn't have somebody to play her husband in it, and then she suggested this actor whom she pretended she didn't know. And when they rang him up, she answered the phone, and the guy said, "Oh, I must have got the wrong number." And she said, "No, you've got the right number." And then he kind of went, "Oh, God, you two guys are together, aren't you?" Yeah. And she said, "Yeah, we're engaged." So they he sadly died while she was shooting The Frighteners with Peter Jackson.
Michael J.
Yeah.
Fox and Gary
And
Busey's son, actually.
and
Uh,
she tells a lovely story about her time working on The Frighteners, where um, her husband became ill, and how Peter Jackson treated her and what he did for her. And she just says, that she'll never forget him for what he did, because he was just so kind-hearted, and he bent over backwards to assist her with everything he could in her difficulties at that time. But The Howling follows a news lady who is being harassed by a guy called Eddie.
yep, Robert
And
Picardo from Star Trek Voyager fame.
yep, yep, yep. And it's directed by Joe Dante, who prior to that would have made Piranha.
Yep,
And uh,
Gremlins. He made Gremlins.
well, he got Gremlins actually on the basis of how good The Howling was, because the Howling was made for 1.5 million, and it went on to make about 18 million. So he was given the Gremlins gig because of his success with The Howling. And if you go back to Ginger Snaps briefly, actually, the sequel to The Howling is called The Howling 2, Your Sister's a Werewolf. I haven't seen that, but the Howling itself it's a great film. It really is. It has it has shades of, she has this experience at the beginning where she is accosted by Eddie, and the police track him down and they kill him. And she is traumatized afterwards, and her psychiatrist suggests that she goes to this kind of retreat for some R&R, rest and relaxation, and the minute she lands at this retreat, you feel like you're in the Wicker Man.
Yeah, because you got Elizabeth Brooks, which like Ginger Snaps, Elizabeth Brooks plays the head werewolf. She is the sister of Eddie Quist, Robert Picardo's character, but Dee Wallace's character doesn't know this until much later on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this Club Med kind of shit that they went to is actually a werewolf coven. So it's the whole town.
The minute you land there, it just, to me, it gave me Wicker Man vibes, you know. I just thought, here we are in this mysterious area where everyone seems so free spirited, overly free spirited in actual fact, you know. Um, and then of course, as things transpire throughout the film, you have her husband who is attacked, and he transforms, and he is
The shittiest sex scene in the history of movies between him and Marcia. Yeah.
by the
It's
fire.
Yeah, it's two werewolves screwing, and it's bad animation because you're seeing it from a distance, and it's just terrible. But it doesn't kill the whole movie. But that part to me is still hilarious to watch because it's like, I see y'all were trying, but damn.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll forgive it for that, you know. But it it's still quite a good movie, and the fact that everyone is a werewolf at the end, it also, and again, it reminds me of Hot Fuzz. Yeah, have you seen Hot Fuzz? Yeah,
Yeah,
you know, again, it's probably inspired by the Wicker Man as too. You know that the whole town is in on it. You know, the sheriff is a werewolf. Um, everyone's
yes.
everyone's a fucking werewolf. You know.
Slim.
So,
If anybody wants to see Slim Pickens as a werewolf, this is the movie.
yep, Slim Pickens is a werewolf in this. You know, and it's D Wallace for me. She makes it. She carries it really. I feel she does. And you know, she's just been in so many classics throughout the years. E.T. Um, and Cujo, and she's even done some great work in recent years with Rob Zombie. I recently saw Three from Hell, and it's not a bad movie, but she was one of the best things in it as this brutal prison guard, which was so out of character for Dee Wallace, but she was excellent in it. I really enjoyed her. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So,
you kind of got the sense that for once she actually was enjoying playing a antagonist instead of kind of being always the protagonist or
and she
co-protagonist.
made a really fucking decent antagonist too, didn't she? Yeah, she was a bad bitch in that. Yeah, a real bad bitch. But
And
Robert,
I'm sorry, go
no,
ahead.
Robert Picardo apparently improvised the line, I want to give you a piece of my mind when you pick that bullet out of his head, you know. And I am that's, you know, to be fair, the transformation there, it wasn't bad. It was good, you know.
So those that don't might not know who Rob Boutin is. Rob Boutin was a Joe Dante worked with him on Piranha, and Rob Boutin was really young at the time, and it's hard to even follow him because he's such a reclusive person. But prior to Howling, he had worked on John Carpenter's The Thing. So when all those gnarly, messed up alien things that you see in The Thing, that was Rob Boutin. And when he did The Howling, when you watch Eddie Quist, Robert Picardo transform, you notice some similarities between the shit that he did in The Thing and what he's doing with Eddie Quist's transformation, like the air bladders under the skin bubbling out and different things like that. Just little subtle. I don't know. I've always noticed special effects artists, like musicians or even writers. It, their styles are almost like their fingerprint. Botine has this very off the wall, gory, gross, kind of turn your stomach kind of style with the way he does his effects.
Well, his work on The Thing is just otherworldly. You know, I love it. I absolutely adore that film. I just think it is up there with Halloween. It's one of Carpenter's best. It is an incredible piece of work. Um, they I have a T-shirt actually with the head with the spider legs, and there's the writing on the top of it that says, "You gotta be fucking kidding," you know. that
I've always said it was
that
Kurt Russell's best movie
yeah,
to me.
absolutely. It's an absolute fucking gem of a film. But people will debate about werewolf movies, and they will say, what's the best one of all time, you know, and it'll come down to the two, The Howling and An American Werewolf in London. But the consensus is that it is An American Werewolf in London.
And I
And
don't
that
think
is
anybody's going to argue that because, I mean, it's, I mean, fuck. I mean, where can you really argue that point at? I mean, from the storytelling to the lore that they provided, that, that kind of builds into everything that's going on. It was as close to a perfect werewolf movie as you could fucking get, in my opinion.
now, as I said, the consensus is that American Werewolf is the best werewolf movie of all time. Yeah, absolutely, you know. So that was made for 5.8 million, and that went on to gross 62 million. That was a lot of money back in 1981. So that was a huge fucking success. Um, I'm not even going to, I'm just going to mention, but I'm not even going to discuss the sequel, which was a fucking
CGI
tra-
bullshit.
tragedy, piece of shit, An American Werewolf in Paris. Just fucking garbage. Forget about it. Don't even bother your arse watching it. If you're a big fan of American Werewolf in London, leave it at that and don't go to Paris because that film is fucking garbage.
But if
Yeah.
you're just a horror guy like me and Brandon and you just want to watch it and say that you watched it, then go ahead, but you're not going to be impressed. That's for damn sure.
The thing about this film was Landis was in Yugoslavia and he was working on Kelly's Heroes. And he said he was out on this stretch of dirt road with this other guy driving a Jeep when they came across a group of gypsies. And he said they were like gypsies that you would see that were like extras in Lon Chaney Jr.'s The Wolfman. They had the gypsy garb, the earrings, the whole lot. And they were burying one of their dead. And they were burying him in such a way that it was because I think they were burying him in a way that they didn't want him to come back from the dead.
So it was kind of
Yeah.
like the way Mariah Espinkaya did with Bela Lugosi in the Wolfman. When Bela Lugosi died, she was reading or whatever it was, that curse that she was reciting as she was burying him or something to that effect. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
And he said that the guy that was with him, who was a bit of a sadistic fucker, um, he was laughing his ass off at this whole thing. These gypsies and their burial traditions, but it inspired him to write An American Werewolf in London, and he obviously for many years had it, gathering dust, and he went on to make a film called Schlock with Rick Baker, and I think that's the first time they worked together, where John Landis played this ape man, and the makeup effects were done by Rick Baker, and then they got the budget to make An American Werewolf in London, and this broke boundaries in so many ways because it gave makeup artists recognition at the Academy Awards, because Rick Baker won an Academy Award for his work in this, and deservedly so. And to stick with Rick Baker for a second and his work on this, and this is completely ironic. So, 1981, American Werewolf in London comes out. Rick Baker is really challenged by John Landis to create so much. And there is so much in this movie, which we'll come back to in a second, right? And then in 2010, he lobbies to be in Universal's remake of The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro. And he wants to do it all practical. And they're like, oh, we don't want to do it all practical. Now, I don't know who, because Joe Johnston directed it. And in fairness to Joe Johnston, he has made some good movies like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Jumanji and The Rocketeer, and a lot of family cult classics. And there is some very gory bits within The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, but critically panned and a financial failure. And he told a story to Joe Rogan where he said that he was called into the production manager's office, and the production manager said to him, "What the fuck is the story with you buying all this hair?" And Rick Baker said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "This hair. What the fuck do you want all this hair for?" And he said, right behind the production manager's um, desk was this picture, this poster of the movie, The Wolfman. And he said, "Well, without this hair," he said, and he came up and he covered the word wolf with his hand. He said, "That's what you're going to have," he said, "the man." So this guy just didn't get it at all. And the transformation, where Benicio del Toro is inside in this auditorium with all these intellectuals, these professors and scientists, etc., where um, one guy is trying to claim that he's deluded, and he said all of that was done with CGI, and that's 2010, and you go back to 1981, and everything is done with um, just ingenious practical effects. And to this day, here we are in 2022, and An American Werewolf in London looks a million times better than The Wolfman of 2010. So I cannot understand how, in this day and age, and I know Baker has retired from his work now, unfortunately, um, that we don't have more of this practical stuff, because we long for it. We absolutely ache for it. We're sick to fucking death of seeing CGI. And the let we just talk about the practical effects alone in an American Werewolf. You've got the werewolf himself. The transformation is just incredible. It's absolutely outstanding. The hand, the way it elongates, the the ankles, the way they elongate, the the face, the way it stretches out, the whole lot. The amount of work Rick Baker said that he put into that, and he said he put like months of prep into it, and the whole lot was done in a very short space of time, shooting wise. And he turned around to Landis and he kind of thought, "Is that it?" And Landis was like, "Yeah, that's it." And he went, "Okay," thinking, "Fucking hell, I put in a lot of work into this. This better work out." And when he watched it at the movie theaters with people, they got up off their seats and they fucking applauded it because they just thought this was the most incredible thing they'd ever seen in their life. And they were dead right. And not only did you have that, but you had Griffin Dunn, you know. So obviously, if we're to tell the story of an American Werewolf in London, for anyone who doesn't know and should know, um, you've got these two American tourists who arrive in England. They're walking on the moors, and they arrive at this pub called the Slaughtered Lamb, and it's a very aloof pub when they arrive inside there, and they're told, stick to the road, and they're very enigmatic about what the hell is actually out there until they go out there. And of course, I'll always remember them singing Santa Lucia, as the rain pisses down on top of them. And then of course, all of a sudden you get the POV of the werewolf and the attack. And the lads come along and they shoot the werewolf and he transforms back into a man, and David Kessler ends up in a hospital. And you've got the brilliant Jenny Agutter who plays Alex, the love interest in it. And then you've got Griffin Dunn's character who comes back, you know. And initially when he comes back, his throat is torn out. The makeup effects are brilliant. He's got this little piece of flesh that's just dangling there, And I just love, and it's just such a very normal line, but the way he said it, and I have a piece of toast.
Yeah.
He just fucking walks into the hospital, and he's like fucking dead, and he's just all fucked up, like he's like, "Can I have a piece of toast?" And he's telling David, you know, "You've got to break the curse," and
By
and
offing
every
himself.
yeah, and exactly, and every time you see Jack as he reappears and reappears, he's decomposing, um, and it's just fucking awesome, that that piece at the theater and in the end
When
was
he's sitting there with all the people that he's killed.
yeah, that was a puppet according to Rick Baker. The head, which is it was practically a skull at this point, but it was the skull shape of Griffin Dunn, and Griffin Dunn was actually doing the puppetry and then saying the lines, for his character of Jack, and it's
One of
just unbelievable shit.
one of my favorite scenes was the nightmare where he had the nightmare of the werewolf Nazis, and I've got those three figures there in my living room. I'd had to go out there and grab them, but I have NECA put out a set of those three werewolf Nazis from that nightmare sequence.
And there's some really interesting trivia from this movie as well. So, one of my favorite pieces of trivia from this movie is that Frank Oz appears twice in this movie, right? He appears as the diplomat from the U.S. Embassy who comes to visit David Kessler, and then he appears as Miss Piggy because when David is dreaming of him being at home back in New York, uh, his family are sitting down and they're watching the Muppet Show, and Miss Piggy and Kermit are on, and then of course the doorbell rings, and as you would have it, zombie Nazis are at the fucking door, like, and they come in and there's just carnage and everything about that scene is just. And then he wakes up and he tells Jenny Agutt's character that he had a nightmare, and she goes to open the curtains and another zombie Nazi comes from. I mean, like, no, but there's so many decent frights in that movie that are just so fucking decent. They're absolutely stellar. They're just love them, absolutely love them, really.
Yeah,
And
and John Landis was not a horror writer or director. He was a comedy writer and director. I mean, this was his first foray in the horror,
yeah, I
and he
mean,
knocked it out of the fucking park.
you look at Landis's career. You've got Coming to America. You've got Trading Places. You've got the Blues Brothers. Um, where if people know Landis for comedy, and if you turn around and say, "Oh, by the way, he made this movie about a werewolf called An American Werewolf in London," they would go, "Fuck off! You're shitting me." And no, no, he did. Um, it's just incredible. Uh, Another piece of trivia I learned while researching this film was there's a scene where David Kessler, towards the end of it, is trying to get arrested, and he is running through Trafalgar Square, and it was about 8 months before Princess Diana and Prince Charles, or Diana Spencer as she was then, got married. And in order to try and get arrested, he shouts out, "Prince Charles is a F word," you know, F FAG, the derogatory term for a homosexual. Um, and in the credits, they actually had to congratulate Princess Diana and Princess Charles on their wedding, almost as a kind of form of an apology for that line in the movie.
I've got a piece of trivia for you too.
Right.
David Naughton.
Uh-huh.
This was the first movie he ever did. Prior to this, guess what he was best known for? Dr. Pepper commercials.
Yes, I did hear something about that actually. Yeah. Yeah. That funny how he was picked from a Dr. Pepper commercial, but I, he still worked and he worked very well. Um, do you watch What We Do in the Shadows, the TV series?
No, but I keep getting told to watch it. I don't ever have time to watch television
Mm.
much.
It's quite funny. There's an episode on it from series one where there's for anyone who knows the show, there's a standoff between the vampires and the werewolves, and one of the werewolves, they're all bipeds in it. But one of the werewolves is wearing the exact costume of David Kessler, the puffy red jacket and the whole that he wore. Yeah. But what we do in the shadows is very funny. It is very good. Um, Michael Jackson loved it so much that he hired the whole fucking team to do Thriller.
Yeah.
So John Landis came on board, directed
Rick
the
Baker did the
Rick,
makeup.
Rick Baker did the makeup, and to be fair, I wouldn't be a huge Michael Jackson fan, but that music video did creep me out as a child, you know. And that had everything that was so good, Vincent Price's monologue and the makeup effects and the dance moves, the whole lot. That was. an absolute stellar piece of work as well. So hats off to Landis and Baker for, what shall we say, um, the way they topped their work. So some people can do a piece of work and then they can try and replicate it in some way, and it might necessarily work. It may fall on its arse. But Thriller, the music video, is a classic. It is. And that
And
and an American Werewolf, yeah.
as far as
So
American Werewolf in London, I would go as far as to say it is the greatest horror movie of the 1980s that wasn't a slasher.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It because it is so much. It like if you think of the scene where he goes into the porno theater and he meets Jack inside there and he meets all the people that he killed, and they're all just sitting there torn to shreds with all of the fantastic makeup effects from Rick Baker, and they're telling him how he should kill himself, and eventually he transforms again, and the staff are alerted to something really peculiar going on within the theatre, and the police, the bobbies, as they call them in London, are called. There is that scene where he bursts out through the door and he just decapitates the head. Do you remember that? And the head rolls across the fucking street, and a bus comes along, and there is multiple cars collide with each other, and there are people flying through windscreens. It is fucking carnage. That is one absolutely crazy fucked up scene. There are people being crushed between cars, people that are flying out windscreens, like I say, people are being run over by buses. So, I mean, the kill count in this is it's almost like Final Destination, the way that goes. Um, and, and and it's all because of what the werewolf did when he came out of the theater, just by lopping the head off of I think he was the chief of police or something. That
I
scene
still
is,
like I still like when the Bobby walks into the actual movie theater
yeah,
and
and you
there's
see the
where
face,
he's
yeah,
feeding. He's sitting there
he-
feeding on
yeah.
human flesh right there. And I mean, for 1981, that was gruesome to see something like that.
And that brilliant shot of the top of the escalator, where you look down at that guy who has ran, um, as they call it in London, the tube. You guys call it the subway, or they call it the tube, or they call it the London Underground. And he's running from the werewolf, and you just see the POV, and then you get the reveal from this high shot of the top of the escalator looking down at the werewolf as he slowly hones in on the guy who has just tripped and fallen on the escalator. And Rick Baker wanted the werewolf to be a biped. He did, because he said to himself, and he said to Landis, he said, "How the fuck are we going to do this? How the fuck are we going to make him a quadruped?" And what they did was they did it almost like, um, have you ever seen somebody doing what's called a wheelbarrow race?
Hmm.
Yeah. So they had an actor in the front with controlling because you don't see the rear end of the wolf. You see the front legs of the wolf, and he's lying on a plank, and he's in full costume, And then you've got because he said he had a team of 6 people working with him, and he said most of them were just young people, fans of his, who were willing to help him out on this, and they they were just rolling him along as he was, when he comes out of the theater, and he's rolling along, or he's walking along as a quadruped on the streets of London, or when he's walking into shot in the underground. That's all, you know, a guy lying horizontally on a plank with a few guys behind him pushing him. Yeah, but it works incredibly well, and it to this day is it's unreplicated. It is unreplicated. Nobody has nobody has ever come anywhere fucking near recreating what they did with an American Werewolf. They
It was
haven't.
the greatest practical effects without CGI
Yeah,
that's ever been done on screen.
yeah, yeah. There's no doubt about it. And John Landis would also say that he thinks that this movie is horror. He doesn't like the idea of it being called a horror comedy because he says that there's more horror in it than there is comedy.
Yeah,
But
I didn't see a whole lot of the ha ha laughy shit in it to me. I mean, there was, but it wasn't oversaturated like you would see in something like Scary Movie or something like that, you
oh
know?
no, no, no. Um, there is that scene where they're in the porno theater, and John Landis has this thing about he features this fictional film in his movies all the time called "See You Next Wednesday." Do you know about that?
Mm.
Do you not? No. So yeah, in every John Landis movie, there is a fictional movie advertised called "See You Next Wednesday." Yeah,
I never paid attention to that.
yeah.
I'll have to look at that look for it next time I watch.
You see an advertisement for it in the underground when the guy is running from the wolf, and then in the porno theater, um, you see an advertisement for it as well. I think but there's that piece that they show in the porno theater where there's these 2 people. Um, they're about to get down and dirty, and this guy walks in and he goes something like, "Oh, what does he say again?" He says, "You tell me you'd never do this to me again." And she says, "I don't know who the hell you are." And he goes, "Oh, sorry about that." And he walks out. Just little comic bits like that, and as I say, just that simple line, "Can I have a piece of toast?" To me, that's funny. There's an actor. He's passed away since, but he was a very, very funny British comedian called Rick Mail. Never heard of him, no?
Yeah, I'm looking at him right now. Rick Mail, second
Mm,
chess player in the American Werewolf in London.
yeah. He was a very, very popular British comedian. Um, Tried to make it in Hollywood with a movie called Drop Dead Fred with Phoebe Cates, which,
Oh my God, that is him. Holy shit.
yeah, yeah,
That's Fred.
um, yeah, Drop Dead Fred. Bit of a cult classic, but I don't think it lit up the box office or it didn't
No.
impress the critics so much. Yeah, but Rick Mail is in that, and he's done some legendary comic performances. Like he has played characters. There's a great TV series from the 80s called The Young Ones. Great TV series from the 90s called Bottom. And Rick Mail is a very physical comedian, and he's in it. And of course, Frank Oz. Frank Oz is not just an actor and a puppeteer, but he's also a director as well, and he's known for his comic work. So, and then you have John Landis, who is, primarily a comedy director.
So you got Frank Oz as Mr. Collins, and you even had the late Jim Henson doing the part of Kermit the Frog in this movie.
Yeah, yeah. So, no, it's just um if I ever heard that somebody was making a remake to this, and I think there was mention of it, um, and I don't like to be talking about Hollywood gossipy shit, but I know there was some stuff that went on with John Landis's son in recent years, and it didn't go down too well with people. Max Landis. Um, I read some headline that said apparently due to Max Landis's behavior that it, you know, didn't help with the remake of An American Werewolf. But I don't think it should ever be remade. And that's not for me to sound pretentious, you know, because um, I mean, a lot of us horror fans, we like remakes. We do. But unless you're going to do what Rick Baker did and use practical effects, then don't fucking bother, you know?
Yeah, if you're going to
And
remake it, here's
yeah,
the thing: you're never going to catch that lightning in a bottle that they called at that time. You're not, and it's a waste of time and it's a useless endeavor because 41 years ago they did something that at that point in time had never been done before, and Rick Baker exhausted himself extensively trying to pull it the fuck off. And there was times where Rick, even like you said on the Joe Rogan show, even admitted he didn't know if he was going to be able to pull it off or not
yeah, yeah,
because they didn't know if they were going to get the money, and he needed the money to make the shit happen. And there was, because Hollywood is notorious. I don't know so much anymore. I don't keep up with a lot of it now, but at one point in time, they did not want to spend money on horror films. It was a useless endeavor because they looked at it as like, this is just bullshit we could put into a drive-in theater and make a little scratch here and there. So why should we dump a load of money into it? You know,
The problem with horror movies these days is the producers worry about money, and it's not just horror movies. It's what you guys call R-rated movies, right? You've got a different classification over in America. In Ireland, um, we have 12. We have 15A, which basically means you have to be 15 and accompanied by an adult. We have 16, which would be something like an American Pie movie, and 18 then would be something like an American Werewolf in London. You know, we would just have an 18 certificate, not R rated. So your PG-13, what does that mean exactly?
parental guidance just means that if you're under the age of 17, 18, you can't go into the movie without your parent or guardian being with you.
And that's a PG-13 movie,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
It's a little
okay.
bit more strict than a regular PG. But to be truthfully honest, bro, I've seen people, I've seen young kids go into movies they shouldn't have been going into. A lot of times these guys that are at the movie theater ain't paying attention. And with internet now, these kids can buy their tickets
Yeah,
online and
yeah,
pay for it and get into the movie theater. They don't give a shit, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. But no, you see, even with Marvel, who are making, as we know, billions and billions of dollars with movies, they're they were still heavily reluctant to make Deadpool for so many, many years. For so many reasons, number one, it was going to be R-rated, and number two, you weren't going to see much of the actual actor Ryan Reynolds. and then it came out and it was absolutely fucking brilliant. And the sequel was just as good, in fairness. And now that Disney own it, they're promising that Deadpool 3 will be just like Deadpool 1 and 2. Um, and their worry is with horror movies today is that they don't want to make them, you know, R rated, as you call it, because they won't get bums and seats and they won't make money back. But then you have movies like Joker, which was R rated. I think it was R rated anyway. It
Mm-hmm.
was probably 16 in Ireland. It wouldn't have been an 18. And that went on to gross over $1 billion. Mm.
Yep.
So that's the problem with Hollywood and horror today. But thankfully, it's people like ourselves who are committed to supporting horror and wanting different horrors to be made and you know do things like we're doing right now with having live streams like this and podcasts, etc., whereby we advocate for horror films to be made and we advocate for horror TV shows to be made, and they are being made, and you know, the envelope is being pushed with lots of different things. The Boys, for instance, is back on Amazon Prime this week, and that is R-rated as you can get, in every way. I watched the first two seasons of it, and it's excellent. And I haven't seen any of the new stuff yet, but I will at some point, and I look forward to it, and I hope it's good. So that's their problem. But if you are going to work on an American Werewolf in London, you have definitely got to go back to the practicalities of it, you know. Mm. And even with Gremlins as well, uh, going back to Joe Dante and The Howling, his work with the practicalities. It wouldn't have been, um, and then Rick Baker worked on the sequel, of course. It wouldn't have been what it was without the practical effects. No, absolutely not. Imagine to think that, and I think it was due to reshoots that they had to do a CGI version of Michael Myers' mask in Halloween H2O. No,
Yeah, and it
no,
looked like shit.
yeah, no. So CG really needs to stop, and they need to put more of an investment into practical effects, and I think they'll get their return as a result. And then look, even if they don't get their financial return, they'll certainly get their critical return because the acclaim will be there.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to see it. We don't want to see it anymore. We don't want to see something that we know is just doesn't look real. Absolutely not. So the Underworld series, I ain't gonna watch it anytime soon. I don't know about you, but I'm not gonna watch it.
No, probably not. I do
Is there
have
any?
an honorable mention I want to throw in there. That's
Absolutely.
Werewolf. The Wolf Cop movies, Wolf Cop 1 and Wolf Cop 2. Um, they are very much indie film. They're very much low budget, but there's what they pulled off with the limited amount of money that they had was fantastic. The guy that plays the main werewolf, Lou, he works, I think, as a construction worker in Canada. The director and the producers and them work as construction guys in Canada, so they have regular Joe jobs. Um, and they made this cult classic about this loser cop who's an alcoholic who gets cursed, turns into a werewolf, and somehow he gets stronger the more liquor and donuts he eats. If you've not seen it, Brandon, please watch it and then tell me what you think. It's stupid as fuck, but god damn, it's a good time.
What decade was that made in?
Um, it was just recently made 2015, 2016.
And there's two of them.
Yep, Wolf Cop 1 and Wolf Cop 2, but Wolf Cop 1, yeah, hands down, that one's good.
Okay.
I
Right.
would I put it as one of the greatest werewolf movies of all time? No. But would I put it strongly within the werewolf genre of films? Fuck yes, I would, because it deserves to be there, because you could clearly tell these guys that made it loved werewolves. And the original idea, they had a cop that is a werewolf. I mean, he goes into a store. Now, this is a little bit of a spoiler. They go into a store, it's being robbed, and the robbers are all wearing pig masks, and he's the wolf. Get it? Three little pigs, right?
Ah, yes, yes.
And one of the crooks goes, "Who the fuck are you?" And he goes, "The Fuzz." Stupid, but God, like I said, it's so fucking fun to watch.
So good it's bad. Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I like that. I may just check that out if I can find it somewhere. Yeah, I might watch that. Yeah.
It's
It
free
it
on Amazon right now, I
is it?
think.
Right, okay. I'll I'll check that out if I get an opportunity, yeah. Any other dishonorable mentions, no?
Mm, dishonorable. I have
Mm.
another honorable. Hammer
Yeah.
Horror's Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed. That's a great one.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And of course that gets a mention in An American Werewolf in London. Yeah.
Um, dishonorable mention. I don't know. I was always opposed to that Benicio del Toro one, because I was like, I knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to modernize the Lon Chaney Jr. film, but it didn't click for me. It didn't. Man, I'm not saying that people can't like it. It's just my own personal opinion. Compared to what Lon Chaney did, there's just such a gap there.
If you stick with that for just a second again, and we go back to it. Again, as I was mentioning, Rick Baker's involvement in it, where he was basically told, "What the fuck are you doing?" Um, and he was more or less, he felt, he lobbied to be in it because he was such a fan of the original. It inspired him to be who he was. And
Yeah, because Jack Pierce's makeup work on them old movies.
yeah, and I'd say he felt really burned after it. But you've got Tom Cruise, who is probably one of the hardest working people in Hollywood. I mean, the Mission Impossible franchise has been absolutely outstanding in the last few years. I watched Top Gun Maverick last weekend and I absolutely loved it. And then Universal comes along and they remake The Mummy, and it's a load of horse shit. So what the hell is going on there? And they they hint at the idea of Russell Crowe playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they want to create what was called at the time, I think, the dark universe. And it never got off its feet because somebody somewhere in some fucking ivory tower messed this whole thing up because all they were thinking about was money and not what fans wanted to see. And no, the mummy was like there was a lot of work put into it on Tom Cruise's part, from what I believe, but it's a totally forgettable movie, absolute crap.
No,
So
if I'd have just stuck with the original story and just modernized it a little bit, they'd have been fine.
yeah,
But you tried to take a masterpiece by Boris Karloff and tried to make it something else, and you failed. You
mm,
failed miserably.
yeah. One thing they did do very well actually in the last few years, and it was Blumhouse, was The Invisible Man, but they gave that a completely different twist. Incorporating domestic violence into it. But it was a really, really enjoyable film. And because it's so new, we won't give away any spoilers. I
No,
don't
but
know.
the original with Claude Rains, I mean, fuck. That performance in the original that Claude Rains puts on is just magnificent. I mean,
And it is hard to replicate something like that. John Carpenter tried to do it back in the 90s with Chevy Chase. Didn't work so well. It was okay. It was enjoyable enough.
they tried to do it with Kevin Bacon too.
Yes, Hollow Man, yeah, yeah, not so great. But no, I think Blumhouse got it. They did a good job on the most recent one.
It's a Hollow Man keychain from San Diego Comic Con from way back in the
Ah,
day.
one day I will go. One day I will go. I've never been there, but I will go. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But no, I think it's been a long time since we've seen a werewolf movie that is up there, and the it's amazing to think that 41 years later we still talk about an American werewolf in London, and nothing has topped it since. And that in itself is a stunning achievement. It really is. So I just I adore that film, and it it hasn't dated at all. It really hasn't. I don't feel it has. I mean, if you look back at if you compare Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead to George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, you can see that George Romero's Dawn of the Dead has dated, and Zack Snyder's is updated. But no, they're both great movies. Don't get me wrong, right? But nothing has topped an American Werewolf. Absolutely nothing. And I don't think anytime soon that they will. So whatever Hollywood is doing right now, um, in terms the last one I actually saw was Werewolves Within. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. Um, it wasn't one of those films that I would recommend to people, to be honest. No. It was a kind of a comedy horror, and it was a bit of a whodunit, and it was only okay. Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, I heard the word werewolves, and that caught me, and I kind of thought this might be good, and I watched it, and I thought, nah, not for me, you know. So unfortunately, not. No. We'll have to set up some petition, John, and try and get something decent made in the next few years in terms of werewolves. But people are just they're they're either lazy or they're not imaginative enough or they don't have the skills to make one that will satisfy modern day audiences. Because we don't want CGI anymore. Real horror fans, and I don't mean to sound like a snob here, but real horror fans, we don't want CGI. We don't want it. No, absolutely not.
No, because we want something that looks tangible on the
Yeah,
screen.
yeah. We want something that we think looks real. We want something that looks like the actor himself or herself can actually touch, that they can feel the hair on it, and not something that an actor is reacting to tennis balls on a string or something. No, we want the practicalities of it, and that's
Mhm.
what we want to see. No, so CGI needs to take a back seat going forward. Um, it may work in certain cases, but no, I just think that it's had its day. Mm. There's a time and a place for it, but in horror movies, no, don't want to see it. Definitely not. Like, you talk about zombie movies, and I've said this to a few people. I Am Legend with Will Smith is one of the worst zombie films of all time. is fucking awful because of the CGI. It's just give me a fucking break, you
Yeah,
know?
you could clearly tell the people were fake. They looked
Yeah,
fake.
yeah. Look at Greg Nicotero's work on The Walking Dead, and even From Dusk Till Dawn and stuff like that. You know, that's fucking good shit. There's CGI bullshit. Fuck off. Give me a break. You know. Mm. Sorry for all the bad language, people, but that's what we are. We're horror snobs. We're not horror snobs. We're just joking. You know. Yeah, yeah. So, um, anyway, um, drop us a suggestion in the comments and tell us what you would like us to discuss on the next show. And I'm sure we're more than open, John, to discuss anything, aren't we?
Yeah,
Mm.
I've been looking for a long time trying to get uh, my friend Peter and his wife Michelle Apleonia, the one that does Breathless Beauties, the dolls and stuff. I've been trying to get them on to do a vampire show for like the Lost Boys and different things like that. Look at the ugly vampire and how it morphed into the sexy I don't know, what would you call it? The sexy rocker boy look of the Lost Boys, and how it became like the standard for all the vampire movies that would come later, to include Twilight.
Again, don't we won't say that word anymore. That's a dirty word. Yeah. I was reminded recently actually of Interview with the Vampire. I must rewatch that. I haven't seen it for quite a while, you know. An excellent film, but yeah, vampires definitely is another genre worth talking about. And speaking of vampires and werewolves, one of my favorite lines in any film is "Listen to them, children of the night."
What
Ben,
music they make.
yeah, Bela Lugosi talking about the werewolves. I just love that fucking line. That is so good. Yeah. So. mm.
Bela Lugosi was a master.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, but no, yeah, I'm always happy to come here and discuss all kinds of genres and all kinds of horror and whatever the case may be. You know, always a pleasure, John.
Well, maybe we can set this up, this thing up as like a Monday thing with me and you whenever you got
Well,
a chance.
absolutely, absolutely. And just to remind anybody that doesn't already know, I am heading out to the West Coast, California, 5 weeks from today. And myself and Michelle Blasky will be doing the third channel, which
Brandon
is
plays the asshole in that movie.
I'm playing a bit of an enigmatic person. Yes, yes, yes. And
He
and
is the
just
antagonist.
And just to remind anybody who may have tuned in somewhat late, the reason I'm wearing these little sunglasses here is because the light that is shining on me is burning the retinas out of my eyes. So that's why I'm wearing them. It isn't to look cool or anything, but if it does look cool, fucking A, you know? So, yeah. So yeah, but no, I'm really excited about going to Cali in a few weeks' time. So it's not long from now, and I've got everything prepared, and really looking forward to the shoot. And we had a production meeting last night, and everything is going in the right direction, thankfully. You know, so it's it's gonna be for me traveling all the way from Ireland. It's going to be a very exciting experience for me. You know, I've done a lot of different projects in Ireland, but working in California with real horror fans is just going to be a dream come true for me, because there isn't that much of a horror community in certainly where I live anyway, you know.
Damn, I
So
thought Ireland would be deep in that shit because of all the lore and stuff.
it all depends, I think people like myself, certainly, from what I do professionally, um, in the health services, and the way I dress, and everything, people don't expect me to be the horror aficionado that I am. But one thing I don't do is I don't do merch. I don't have, and I say this to people. I follow a lot of horror types on TikTok and social media platforms, and I do enjoy their content. But I don't buy pop figures. I don't buy any kind of figurines at all. So I don't have the space for them. You know.
Well,
So
my whole studio in here is covered in the shit, so I'm just the opposite.
yeah. Yeah. No,
But
I like the idea of it. I love it, and I know some people will probably make lots of money over them at some point in their lives, maybe from selling them on. But for me, I'm just happy to sit back and watch a good horror. And it's these days, it's only now and again that a good horror comes along. You know, this year alone, we've only had a handful of them. Mm. And I suppose the big horror news from yesterday actually was that Nev Campbell is not returning for the new Scream movie. Mm.
oh, so
So
they got to replace her
yeah.
now or write
there,
her.
there's speculation that the new Scream movie could turn into a kind of a two-parter. So Courtney Cox is definitely returning, according to her, and people are speculating that she will be killed in it, and then the ghost face will get away, and then in the subsequent sequel, that Nev Campbell will come back to avenge Gail Weathers' death. So whether that will happen or not, I have no idea. But that's the one thing I love about horror today, or any movie for that matter, is going in blindly and not knowing too much about it, because spoilers piss me off big time. Ty West's X, which I watched recently, I knew very little about it other than it had great recommendations and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm. I'm bad
Watch
about
it.
watching new horror movies. I am.
Watch it though, because it's set in the 70s. Um, that's all I'll tell you. Yeah, and it's definitely worth a watch. Yeah, so I do like all things horror, and I must try and sit down and watch some of the more older stuff as well. But it's all about getting the time and opportunity, because working full time, I just don't get the opportunity to sit down and watch these things. And the other thing as well, of course, is that when you have on demand services like Netflix and Disney Plus, and that's all we have in Ireland. We have Amazon as well. You don't get the you don't get what you want. You only get what the algorithm feeds you. So it can be hard if somebody recommends um, a movie to you and you can't find it, and you've got to go and find some dodgy streaming site to watch it on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've no choice other than that, because where else are you going to get it? I don't have a DVD player. I don't have a VCR player. And where are you going to get a VCR? And so why would you go through all that hassle? But no, I must go back and try and find these older movies, the even older ones that you're talking about. I will get around to watching The Cabinet of Dr. Kilgary. It's on my to-do list. But
Well, I'm actually doing a stream of that on Saturday. Being that movie is in the public domain, I can stream it on my live stream and not get in trouble for copyright because it's over 100 years old. Nobody really owns the copyright anymore. It's listed in the German archives as, an historical film from Germany, but as terms of anybody owning the copyright, there's really no one. They're all
well,
dead.
depending on the different time zones, if I'm available, I'll certainly tune in. But let me know the time, and I'll try because I am working on Saturday. But I'll try and tune in, and if I can't, then I will um, try and find. Maybe you could send me. Maybe you could send me on a link for it. You see,
Okay.
that's the other thing. There, you might send me on a YouTube link from Hawaii, and it mightn't even work for me here in Ireland.
Hmm.
I don't have a VPN because I'm already paying a subscription for Netflix, and I'm paying a subscription for other things like Disney Plus. So I don't want another. I've got Spotify. I don't want to pay another one for a VPN. So it's just one thing after another. We don't have HBO Max here in Ireland either. Um, so we don't have Hulu. We don't have a lot of things. We don't have Shudder, and we don't. And so many people. I have to give a shout out to Dos Incredibles, who I do some shows with, Jeff and Mario. Um, Great guys, and they're constantly talking about Joe Bob Briggs and The Last Drive-In and Shudder, and I can't watch it because I don't have it. You know, so I don't know how I can watch the Last Drive-In at all. And they're doing, I think, in about 4 or 5 weeks' time, they're doing a special on Halloween season of the witch with Joe Bob Briggs, and they'll probably have Stacey Nelkin and Tom Atkins, Tommy Lee Wallace, etc. on there to talk about it, and I'd love to see it. But I have no idea how I can get a link to watch it. So
Damn shame.
that's my situation here in the Emerald Isle, unfortunately. Mm, mm. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. And John, always a pleasure, dude. Real pleasure. Yeah.
I can't
And
wait to do it again with you.
absolutely, absolutely. And you drop me a line, you tell me what we want to discuss, and I look into it, and we will nerd out on it. And anybody who has watched this, if you want to throw a suggestion in the comments, we'll certainly take it on board, and we will wade through whatever's there, and we will try and discuss and compare and contrast, and do whatever we can to dissect and PM these movies for you to make them and tell you things that you may or may not have known about them. So yeah, from me here in the Emerald Isle, it's what is it? It's 10 past 11 in the morning. So I'm going to say good morning as opposed to good night, and you're
And
going to say good
yep,
night or good morning.
it's midnight here, and my fat ass has got to go to bed because I got to get up and go to
The
work tomorrow.
witching hour. Mind yourself, buddy, and I'll talk to you soon, okay? All
All
right.
right, brother.
Always a
Talk to you
pleasure,
later.
sir. All right.
And
Take care,
you
buddy.
guys, we'll see you later.